untouched, foggy glass window. And just for the heck of it, I wrote my mother's name in big block letters across the glass. Her name is Lily L. Taylor. And I wrote it in real bold, my finest script, and I put it out there. And then I just walked off. I didn't think about it anymore. And of course, a couple of hours later, it all just disappeared as the temperature changed and so on. Well, just hold on to that point for a second. My mother was in the habit of taking her ironing board into the dining room and ironing while she looked out the window into the backyard. Well, a few days passed, and I think it was a Saturday afternoon. It was a very cold day, and the entire family was home. We were spread out around the house, a very warm house. My mother was in the dining room ironing. Suddenly, we all heard her go, We all ran into the dining room, my father, my sisters, and I, and there was my mother, her eyes as big as saucers, the iron in one hand, and she's pointing at this window. And there across the glass, rising up like some phoenix from the ashes, is Lily L. Taylor. I think she thought God was talking to her or something. I cannot remember if I ever told my mother what that was or not. But in any event, this was the type of thing that's kept my mother young for years. So this game that I mentioned a few moments ago that my sisters and my brother and I used to play was no big deal to her, but it was just another strange thing that we happened to do. Well, in this particular game, my sisters and my brother and I would go into the living room late at night, and we'd shut all the shutters and the curtains, and then turn out all the lights, so it was pitch black. And then, as we tried to move about in the dark, we would bump into furniture and trip over the carpet, and we'd bruise our elbows and our shins. And this was all great fun to us. We thought this was just wonderful. And God help you if you bump into another person, because he would grab you and let out a shriek that would scare you. And we just thought that was great. Well, the object of the game was to find your way out of the room without having a heart attack. And this was this game we used to play periodically. Now, why did I tell that very silly story? I told it because I think it's analogous to the situation mankind finds itself in today. It doesn't take an astute psychologist or a sociologist or a psychiatrist to recognize that we are at a point in our evolution where we are wrapped in a darkness unlike anything that can be found in our history. In fact, you don't even have to be in touch with the revelation of God for this day to see that we are moving at a dizzying speed toward world chaos and ultimately the self-destruction and total extinction of mankind. Now, I realize that these are very strong words, but I chose them very carefully because they do convey a very serious message. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean. The world, as you know, is confused, and its priorities are sadly misplaced. For example, contaminated water accounts for 80% of the world's diseases. Yet the cost of a global sanitary water supply is equal to less than 3 weeks of the nuclear arms race. Imagine that. We have the technology. We don't have the unity. We don't have the priorities. In the same vein, the $300 million that it took to wipe out smallpox in the last decade equals less than 5 hours of the current military budget. Do we sound confused? I think so. The Western world has become very conservative in the last few years. I'm sure you've noticed. We're really steeped in tradition in recent years. On the lighter side, how many of you saw the wedding of Prince Charles and Diana? Now, I love Prince Charles and Diana. Don't get me wrong. But I was listening to the commentator, and I thought, we really are into tradition, aren't we? The commentator, as she came down the aisle, the commentator noted about Diana. She said, this is true. This is a quote. She said, "The silkworms that spun the threads of Diana's dress are the ancestors of the silkworms that spun the threads for the wedding dress of Queen Victoria." I couldn't believe it. And then she said, "The ivy in Diana's bridal bouquet are from the clippings of the clippings of the clippings of the bridal bouquet of Victoria. And this was very important to them. I just thought about it. That's so interesting to me, the way our priorities are. Irreligion is sweeping the globe. We all know that. There's a story that's told of the minister who was just absolutely fed up with the immorality and the decay in society, and he decided he was going to do something about it. So he went to the first bar he could come to in his town, and he stormed in, and he went up to the first man he saw with a drink in his hand, and he said, "Brother, do you want to go to heaven?" And the man said, "Yeah, I do, Reverend." He says, "Put down that drink and go stand by the wall." And he did. And he went to the next man at the bar, and he said, "Brother, do you want to go to heaven?" He says, "You know I do, Reverend." He says, "Put down that drink, go stand by that wall." And he did. And he went to the third man. He said, "Brother, do you want to go to heaven?" The fellow took a sip of his drink. He said, "No." The minister said, "Brother, I don't think you understood me. I said, do you want to go to heaven?" He looked at the minister. He said, "No." The minister couldn't believe it. He says, "Brother, you mean to tell me you don't want to go to heaven when you die?" The man looked at him. He said, "Oh, when I die." He says, "Oh, yeah, I want to go to heaven when I die." He says, "I thought you were getting up a group to go right now." Interesting how we think. Suicide, one of the saddest phenomena of the current decade. Suicide has skyrocketed, especially among teenagers. There's about a 300% increase since 1960 in the suicide rate in America. And now, of course, the authorities are saying that 20% of the American population has mental disorders of one kind or another that should be medically treated. Are we surprised? I don't think so. You know, it's normal to place our hope in the next generation, our children. But you know, I don't have to tell you, our children are in serious trouble too. Nationwide, this year, 100,000 to 500,000 children will be molested. Think about that. Did you know that 90% of all prison inmates claim to have been abused as children? So where does it look like the next generation is going? This is serious. 80% of all high school kids say that they've gotten high on drugs at least once. 80%. 25% say that they're regular users. And now reports are saying that many kids are introduced to drugs as young as 10 years old. What does that say about our future? While we're talking about high school, lack of education is a significant problem in the world. A big, big problem. But because we have so much of everything in America, it stands out here that we are so ignorant. You know, 20 million American adults cannot read. That's 1 in 5. And according to the Library of Congress, less than 50% of the adult population reads 1 book a year. Now that really means something to us because, my gosh, the entire revelation of God for this day has been written down. Who's going to read it? These are things we have to be concerned with. And the ones who are educated, well, don't count on them. Did you know that law students as a group steal more library books than any other group? It's true. Law students. You know, I'm from the Chicago area. And in Chicago, you have what amounts to a microcosm of what is going on in the world today. The latest news from Chicago involves one of the most clever, most ingenious insurance scams I have ever heard of. And maybe you read about this. 2 Chicago lawyers, a medical doctor, and a team of stunt drivers, 146 people in all, combined their efforts to participate in a car insurance fraud by deliberately causing accidents with innocent motorists and then collecting the insurance money. Think about that. These doctors and this lawyer and these stunt drivers staged 39 accidents and collected from 17 different insurance companies before they were caught. These are the educated people. They have degrees. We are in serious trouble. Finally, perhaps the most urgent problem of all, the most immediate threat, is that of nuclear war. And that, of course, is very serious. 40 years after the first nuclear bomb, the United States, Russia, Great Britain, France, and China all have nuclear capabilities. And India has one test. And 7 other countries, Pakistan, South Africa, Iraq, Libya, Argentina, Brazil, and Israel, are believed to have the necessary materials and the know-how. Pretty soon, every large or small country will have access to deadly nuclear arms. And in today's technology, it just isn't that hard to make a nuclear bomb. In fact, according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, over 8,000 pounds of plutonium and uranium are now missing from U.S. facilities. Where is all of that stuff? The fact that we're consciously working on these weapons, isn't bad enough. There have been accidents too. We all know about 3 Mile Island, we all know about Chernobyl, but there have been some other deadly errors. For example, in 1961, an Air Force plane carrying a 24 megaton bomb crashed in North Carolina. On crash impact, 5 of the 6 interlocking safety mechanisms failed. Only one switch kept that bomb from exploding and unleashing the equivalent of 1,000 Nagasaki-type explosions. Think about that. And that was a mistake. We've had several incidents where nuclear weapons have literally fallen out of airplanes, just gone through the bomb bays. Probably the most interesting one was one that fell out of a strategic bomber in the Carolinas some years ago. It landed in a Carolina swamp. They looked all over for that weapon, and to this day they haven't found it. I'm not making this up. This is true. Only by the grace of God are we still here. Do you see why I don't hesitate in saying that we are moving rapidly towards self-destruction and extinction? Now that's enough bad news. We say, gosh, this guy's crazy. He's come to scare us to death. No, not at all. But I believe in facing reality squarely. From this world enshrouding darkness, what community will emerge as different? We know it will be the Baha'is. We know that. With over 2,100 races, tribes, and ethnic groups represented, with our writings translated into over 750 languages and dialects, we are, by far, the most heterogeneous, most diverse, most dynamic group of people on this planet. And we have a plan. And it is a plan that is working now in at least 3 important ways. First of all, as you know, people are coming together. When we go to firesides, how often do you hear people say, well, that's a nice idea, but it's just a utopian dream. It's not really going to happen. You can't make the Jews and the Russians and the Arabs, and you can't bring them all together. And the Baha'is just nod and they say, we're doing it now. Every race, tribe, and ethnic group in the world is represented in the Baha'i community. So the Baha'i faith, the cause of Baha'u'llah, is bringing people together. So that's the first important way in which the faith is working. Secondly, our administrative order is in place, it's functioning, and it's strong. Thousands of spiritual assemblies around the world form an interrelated network that is simply miraculous to the rest of the world, who can't understand how we can communicate so easily, so readily. So the administrative order is there, it is functioning, it is strong. And the third very important way in which we know our plan is working is that we are raising a new generation, our Baha'i children, in an environment that is unique in its built-in capacity to promote unity, to promote justice, and to promote an appreciation for the multifaceted beauty of the human family. And that is extremely important. Extremely important. Now, the point of all that I have said is this. For all that we have seen, for all that we have done and accomplished as a Baha'i community, I believe that this unfolding 4th epoch will be the pivotal point. I believe this 4th epoch and what we accomplish therein will tell the tale. If the last several years, both within and without the Baha'i community, are any indication, the changes in the nature, the scope, the influence of the Baha'i community will be nothing short of miraculous. However, this quantum leap in the fortunes of the faith will not come without our paying a price. For example, in the book, The World Order of Baha'u'llah, just one example, there are many warnings from the Guardian about what lies between us now and the lesser peace. For example, on page 17, the Guardian writes, "For let every earnest upholder of the cause of Baha'u'llah realize that the storms which this struggling faith of God must needs encounter as the process of the disintegration of society advances shall be fiercer than any which it has already experienced. Let him be aware that so soon as the full measure of the stupendous claim of the faith of Baha'u'llah comes to be recognized by those time-honored and powerful strongholds of orthodoxy, whose deliberate aim is to maintain their stranglehold over the thoughts and consciences of men, then this infant faith will have to contend with enemies more powerful and more insidious than the cruelest torture-mongers and the most fanatical clerics who have afflicted it in the past. What foes may not in the course of the convulsions that so seize the dying civilization be brought into existence, who will reinforce the indignities which have already been heaped upon it?" So this is the future, says the Guardian. And of course, who can forget the words of Abdu'l-Baha when he spoke of the tests which lie ahead? In the 3-part series, The Power of the Covenant, Abdu'l-Baha is quoted as saying, quote, "Therefore, O ye beloved of God, be not grieved when," and notice he said when, not if, "when people stand against you, persecute you, afflict you and trouble you, and say all manner of evil against you. This we inform you before it occurs, so that when the hosts of the people arise against you for my love, be not disturbed or troubled. Nay, rather be firm as a mountain, for this persecution and reviling of the people is a preordained matter. Blessed is the soul who is firm in the path." The world is enveloped in darkness, but I think that it is clear that the Baha'i community is leading what I call a journey out of the darkness. And like any journey which involves a certain amount of testing, of hardship, of trial and ordeal, this journey requires certain provisions if we are to reach our destination safely. So what I would like to do with the rest of my time with you this evening is share with you a list of provisions which I would hope you would consider as we make our collective journey together. And you'll notice there's nothing really new here. Just some personal thoughts on some of these ideas. The first provision, I think you could guess it. Prayer. Prayer. Why do we pray? This is one quote which I have always enjoyed from Baha'u'llah. It's found in the front of the prayer books. He says, "Intone, O my servant, the verses of God that have been received by thee, as intoned by them who have drawn nigh unto him, that the sweetness of thy melody may kindle thine own soul and attract the hearts of all men. Whoso reciteth in the privacy of his chamber the verses revealed by God, the scattering angels of the Almighty shall scatter abroad the fragrance of the words uttered by his mouth, and shall cause the heart of every righteous man to throb. Though he may at first remain unaware of its effect, yet the virtue of the grace vouchsafed unto him must needs sooner or later exercise its influence upon his soul. Thus have the mysteries of the revelation of God been decreed, by virtue of the will of him who is the source of power and wisdom." You know, sometimes I think we have to pray even when we don't feel like it. Has that thought ever occurred to you? You know, sometimes I think about someone who might be, God forbid, in some kind of accident, and say they're unconscious, and they take you to the hospital and they do whatever emergency procedure they have to do, but then what's the very next thing they do? They hook you up to the IV, right? Why? Because your physical body still needs nourishment. You still need vitamins and minerals and proteins, or else your physical body would just shrivel and die. And you're unconscious. You don't even know it. I mean, you don't say, "Hey, get me a Big Mac. I think I need some food." No, you don't even know it. You're unconscious. But the doctors know it, so they hook you up. In the same way, I often think of prayer. Because I know there are times when I just don't feel like praying. I'm not in the mood or whatever. But I have to force myself to do it. Because I know that like that IV, I have a soul inside of me. And if I don't feed it, it will shrivel up and die. Just like that physical body. So prayer is absolutely essential when we're packing our provisions for the journey out of darkness. The second provision I would suggest is reading the writings. Of course, it goes hand in hand with prayer. We can't take strength from what we don't know. So we have to read the writings. We have to get close to the revelation of Baha'u'llah. The third provision I would suggest, of course, sharing the message, teaching. A man by the name of Orison Marden made an interesting comment. He says, there is no medicine like hope. No incentive so great and no tonic so powerful as expectation of something better tomorrow. I think that's important because the world, you will agree, needs hope. It needs the kind of hope we have in the revelation. This is what Baha'u'llah gave to each of us. This is what we have to give to the rest of the world, hope. And I think it goes beyond the basic principles and the moral laws. Somehow we must lead the world to an understanding of the tremendous dimensions and revolutionary nature of the faith. The power, the miraculous divine power. That's what we have to convey. That sense of hope. That sense of hope. Along with the idea of sharing the message of teaching, I'd like to mention two other provisions that you may not have considered. The first one is reasoned risk-taking. Reasoned risk-taking. It seems to me the New World Order of Baha'u'llah is not going to come without some risk. In fact, we all know that. The believers have been risking life and limb for 140 years. But I think we shouldn't always wait for the risk to be forced upon us. Sometimes I think we need to go out and look for risk, which we might take to advance the cause. In other words, I think we have to challenge ourselves and not worry quite so much about making mistakes. If you never make any mistakes, it means you aren't pushing yourself. It means you aren't trying anything new. You're not doing anything different. Now, what do I mean by reasoned risk-taking? Mortgaging your house to buy lottery tickets is not a reasonable risk. That's stupid. Mortgaging your house to invest in a well-researched business is a reasonable risk. I think you see the difference. So in our teaching work, both as individuals and I think as institutions, we shouldn't be afraid to leave the safe and comfortable and take reasonable risk. In fact, I think it may be essential to our future development as a Baha'i community. The other provision that I mentioned that I'd like to suggest in relation to sharing the message is serendipity. Do you know what serendipity is? Basically, serendipity is that phenomenon wherein you find something you need while looking for something else. Albert Einstein and Thomas Edison, among other notable scientists and inventors, made a very interesting observation about problem solving. They said, first of all, when you have a problem, you have to really work hard, consciously, on solving that problem. And then the formula goes that after you've put in those hard, laborious hours of work, while doing something else, often sleeping, they said the answer would come to them, like some phantom in the night. On the other hand, they all said that if they just went to sleep or didn't work on the problem, the answer never came. So it seems to me that it's often the same way in teaching. For example, how many of you have been involved in a proclamation that you poured a lot of time and a lot of money and effort into and no seekers came? And yet, the very next week, some family of 4 who read a billboard in Poughkeepsie knocked on your door and said, we want to be Baha'is. Have you ever seen that? I've seen that many times. How does that happen? Well, I'm not sure, but I call it serendipity. If you hadn't put forth that initial effort, I don't think it would have happened. It's almost as if God has His big plan and we have our small plan, and God waits to see if we're serious And then he steps in his unmistakable way and gives us what we need. Maybe not what we want, but what we need. So, in any event, I think a working knowledge of the phenomenon of serendipity is an essential provision on our journey. The next provision I would suggest, of course, unity. Unity. The word discord is a very interesting word. It comes from the Latin word discortere, based on dis, which means apart, plus cor, which means heart. Hence, discord means a parting of hearts. Now, we as Baha'is are in the business of bringing hearts together. Unity. It's very important, I think, that we not become a movie front Baha'i community. You know what I mean? You know how you go into Hollywood and you see these movie sets and they look like real houses, but when you walk through the house you find that it's only like a foot thick and behind it's just this old empty beat up lot? It was just an illusion. In the same way, we cannot let the Baha'i faith and its teachings of unity and fellowship begin and end in the words of a pamphlet. Somehow we have got to bring that principle of unity and the oneness of mankind into our daily lives, into our communities, into our personal lives, our professional lives, and so on. We have to, or else we're just going to be like that movie set. Fake, a foot thick, nothing behind it. Billy Graham, Reverend Billy Graham, tells a story about a time early in his career when he arrived in a small town to preach a sermon. He wanted to mail a letter, so he asked a young boy where the post office was. And when the boy had told him, Dr. Graham thanked him and he said to him, "If you will come to the Baptist church this evening, you can hear me telling everyone how to get to heaven." And the little boy said, "I don't think I'll be there. You don't even know how to get to the post office." So we have to show people, we have to show the world that not only has Baha'u'llah given us a map with directions, but we also use it ourselves and we know the way. Unity has got to be part of our lives. The seventh provision, faith. Absolutely essential. The story is told of the climber who fell off a cliff, and as he tumbled down into the huge canyon, he grabbed hold of a branch and held on for dear life. And he shouted, "Help! Is anybody up there?" A deep, majestic voice echoed from the sky, and it said, "I will help you, my son. Fill the entire canyon. I will help you, but first you must have faith and trust me." And the man said, all right, I trust you." And the voice echoed, "Let go of the branch." And there was a long pause, and the man said, "Is there anybody else up there?" It's much easier to talk about faith when you are not the one personally involved, when you're a casual observer. But when it's you whose faith is on the line, it's very different, isn't it? Faith takes on an entirely new meaning. And yet faith may well be one of the most crucial provisions for our journey. Every indication suggests that perhaps the darkest, the most tragic, the most heart-rending days in the history of mankind lie in our immediate future. But even as the central figures warn us of the coming test, they also encourage us. They encourage us with words such as these. This is from a tablet which was previously untranslated by Baha'u'llah. And I want to check my time. I end at what time? How nice, 10 minutes. I can read the whole quote. Baha'u'llah encourages the friends and he says this. He says, "Whatsoever occurreth in the world of being is light for his loved ones and fire for the people of sedition and strife. Even if all the losses of the world were to be sustained by one of the friends of God, he would still profit thereby. Whereas true loss will be borne by such as are wayward, ignorant, and contemptuous." Although the author of the following saying had intended it otherwise, yet we find it pertinent to the operation of God's immutable will. Quote, even or odd, thou shalt win the wager. Listen to that. Even or odd. Makes no difference. Thou shalt win the wager. Then he goes on to say, and listen to this. The friends of God shall win and profit under all conditions, and shall attain true wealth. In fire, they remain cold, and from water they emerge dry. Think about that. In fire, the friends remain cold. From water they emerge dry. Their affairs are at variance with the affairs of men. Gain is their lot, whatever the deal. To this testifieth every wise one with a discerning eye, and every fair-minded one with a hearing ear. We're playing with a stacked deck. Well, that sounds bad. It sounds like we're cheating or something, but it's true. The deck is stacked in our favor. Faith. And of course, all of these wonderful promises are contingent upon what? Our firmness in the covenant. Absolutely. This is what our faith is all about. As long as we stand firm in the covenant, we cannot lose. That's what Baha'u'llah says here. So we are not worried about what's going to happen. Not really. We know it's a long and arduous and difficult journey, but we're not worried. We know what the outcome will be. And you know, friends, that includes the calamity. It includes the calamity. What is the calamity? What is it? People talk about it all the time. What is it? When will it come? Who knows? Baha'u'llah said no man knows when the calamity will come. No man knows what form it will take. But according to Baha'u'llah, the greatest calamity is if we are caught outside the bounds of the covenant. That is the true calamity. So the Baha'is are not afraid of any calamity, and we're not going to run anywhere, because the truth is, if we are within the bounds of the covenant, we are safe anywhere. And if we are outside the bounds of the covenant, we are in danger everywhere. That's all we need to know. The rest is academic. So faith. When we talk about faith, we have to know that our faith is inextricably, inseparably bound up with the covenant. And with our faith firmly rooted there, we cannot fail to safely reach our journey's end. And last but not least, the final provision I would suggest is laughter. I think it's important. Don't forget to include it in your daily life. You know, over 2,000 years ago, Aristotle said, laughter is a bodily exercise precious to health. You know, few activities can produce such widespread effects. It aids digestion by increasing glandular secretions. It relaxes the muscles, brings a blush to the skin, a sparkle to the eyes. You know, one psychiatrist said, I've seldom been called upon to help a person who had a sense of the ridiculous. And he went on to say, I've never had to treat anyone who could really laugh at himself. Many of you are probably familiar with this story that Abdu'l-Baha tells. He says that when they were in Akka, in the prison, he said each night Baha'u'llah would gather the friends together, and he would force each one, not force, but he would have each one recount something funny that had happened that day. Now Abdu'l-Baha says, you know, in Akka, sometimes that was pretty tough to do. You couldn't find very many things that were funny. But he says by the end of the evening, the friends would just be laughing so hard and having a wonderful time, you would never imagine they were prisoners. Why do you think Baha'u'llah did that? I think laughter is a very important element in our journey. So I would encourage you to remember to make it a part of your daily life. I'm almost out of time, and I'd like to share with you One or two brief thoughts as I close. You know, the rich and the famous and the politically powerful and the affluent, these people were offered the priceless gift of God over 100 years ago. They refused it. So he offered that gift instead to the common man, to the everyday person, to the bricklayer, to the plumber, to the school teacher, to the Coke machine repairman, to the Vietnamese peasant, to the Navajo artist, to the student, to the housewife. He offered it to you and to me. And by the grace of God, we accepted it. And that is why I can say to you, you are special. If you are in this room, you are very, very special. Most importantly, this present generation of Baha'is, selected by God from all the peoples of the world, from all the generations of the past and future, this generation has been chosen to live at the time when humanity will finally come of age. Thus, each of us has a special capacity, a special quality, which has the potential to play an essential part in humanity's journey out of the darkness. I believe this. The point is, I don't think you are a Baha'i by accident. I don't believe it for a second. You are a Baha'i by plan, by divine design. You are a Baha'i at this crucial point in history for a reason. The challenge is yours. The challenge is mine. Daily we must say to ourselves, I am a Baha'i. What can I give that is uniquely me? What can I contribute to assist mankind in its journey out of darkness? What role can I play to assist in the building of a new world order? And as we ponder these questions, step by step continuing on our journey, which now takes us into the fourth epoch of our glorious faith, let us hold in our minds and our hearts these prophetic and encouraging words of the beloved guardian when he writes, quote, "The champion builders of Baha'u'llah's rising world order must scale nobler heights of heroism as humanity plunges into greater depths of despair, degradation, dissension, and distress. Let them forge ahead in the future, serenely confident that the hour of their mightiest exertions and the supreme opportunity for their greatest exploits must coincide with the apocalyptic upheaval marking the lowest ebb and mankind's fast declining fortunes." Dear friends, God be with you. Allah Apah, thank you.